By now, it's clear that fossil fuels are not the way forward. They're driving climate change and they're also running out and won't be replenished in our lifetime. That's why the world is pinning its hopes on renewables like sun, wind and biomass, which is the subject of our show today. Hello and welcome to this new edition of Echo Africa. I am Chris Elems.
And I am Sandra Twinobdu. Now, what is biomass exactly? It is plant-based material that can be used as fuel to produce heat or electricity. But haven't we learned that burning wood and other organic material produces carbon dioxide emissions? Well, that depends on how it is done. So here's a look at what we have coming up. We'll see how organic material can also be used to make fertilizer, how crop residues can help boost the energy grid, and how both organic and non-organic matter pollute waterways. Some months ago, the Somali government declared a state of emergency. Drought there has left more than 2 million people facing severe water shortages and also hunger. The UN's Food and Agriculture Organization says the situation is extremely worrying. But on top of the drought, ongoing conflict is forcing people to flee their homes. Many have ended up in internal displacement camps. In one camp, for example, clean technology is being used to ensure people are getting the food they need.
Until now, Musa Iselo Yabaro has had to overcome her fear to cook on her wood-burning stove. The mother of 6 children was forced to flee from severe drought and lives in a camp for internally displaced persons in Jowhar, central Somalia. Providing for her family in the camp has been fraught with serious danger.
We fled from Jalayela and live in this IDP camp. Normally, we cut wood from the jungle to cook food. We face a lot of problems when we're in the jungle. We face sexual harassment, including rape.
The other women in the camp report the same. Sexual assaults are a regular threat. But the fear of being attacked while gathering wood will now hopefully disappear, just like the smoke pollution from the charcoal stoves. In this communal kitchen, the women take turns cooking for their families with biogas. They get it free of charge from a nearby biogas plant. The women of the camp also provide the fuel for the biogas production themselves by collecting fresh cow dung. The dung is poured into a trough and stirred before it goes into the biodigester tank. The gas produced in the tank is piped underground into the communal kitchen, where it provides a hotter and cleaner flame than charcoal. For the around 100 women here, the biogas is liberating in many ways.
Biogas is a great solution for us. We used to worry about wood when we had too little to cook with, because it was too dangerous for women to collect wood in the jungle. Now, when we come home late, we can cook our food in the biogas kitchen without worrying.
Besides providing free, clean energy for cooking, the biogas plant also helps the farmers in the region. The used cow manure from the biodigester tank can be dried, crushed into powder and packaged as fertilizer for local farmers. One bag costs about €30. But it's worth it, thanks to higher yields and better quality produce.
My farm used to produce 40 bags of corn, with each weighing 100 kilos. But last season we used biogas fertilizer and we harvested 80 bags of corn, each weighing 100 kilos. We expect more this season.
Even though the country often lacks the know-how and financial resources for a large-scale implementation, the potential of biogas is enormous, says Ahmed Mohamed Jamale, a renewable energy expert and environmental consultant.
In Somalia, there are 36 million livestock animals, according to FAO. That's roughly 2.2 animals per inhabitant. So animal manure is plentifully available in Somalia. So basically, to use a biogas in Somalia is very viable.
Biogas technology might still be in its infancy in Somalia, but the first steps have been taken. And for the women in the refugee camps, the transition to clean energy has already had a positive impact on their lives.
So biomass involves regrowing resources and using waste to make energy. It certainly seems like the perfect alternative power source, and it is currently responsible for 5% of energy globally. But is there a downside? How clean is it really?
That's a very good question, Sandra, and one that doesn't really have a simple answer. We want to look now at some of the pros and cons of using biomass to create energy on a large scale. As with so many things, it is neither a miracle cure nor a quick fix. And if managed poorly, it can lead to more harm than good.
Our banana peels, nutshells, and other leftover foods can actually power the device you're watching this on. It's called biomass energy. Not just leftovers, wood, plants, or animal feces can also be a source of electricity or heat. We are surrounded by biomass and, as such, by opportunities. Trash from the dump, as well as waste from homes, restaurants, or farms, all provide suitable organic matter. The collected waste is cleaned at a processing plant. At temperatures of around 55 degrees Celsius, the waste is sealed off from oxygen and eaten up by bacteria in a bioreactor. This process, called anaerobic digestion, generates gas that contains high quantities of methane. It's a powerful source for generating electricity and heat once it's fed into the gas grid. It can also be used to power natural gas vehicles. The leftover biomass can be used as compost for farming, for example, making the whole process circular. Biogas plants of this type exist all over the world. In Europe, there are around 20,000. There are 2,200 biogas plants in the US, and about the same in Thailand, Malaysia, and Indonesia combined. Biogas plants produce only a quarter of the CO2 emissions that coal plants emit. And
biomass energy has one large advantage over solar and wind in that it's on demand. So you don't care if the wind's blowing and the sun's shining.
But there is a catch. Biomethane can leak from these facilities. This gas's ability to warm the planet is much greater than that of CO2. And biogas facilities are only sustainable as long as waste is used. If crops are cultivated for the purpose, it's not viable. The same is true of biofuels produced from biomass, like bioethanol or biodiesel. The crops for them need to be grown, and that takes away space for food crops, or even depletes forests and biodiversity, as is happening with palm oil trees in Indonesia, sugarcane in Brazil, and rapeseed in Germany. Wood pellets are an alternative and increasingly popular biofuel, but researchers say there is strong evidence that natural forests and habitats in Eastern Europe and North America are being destroyed by the rising demand for wood pellets through illegal logging. US, EU and British policymakers have classified woody biomass as renewable, and therefore governments are subsidizing the production and burning of wood pellets. Producers are required to reforest areas so the CO2 that is released while burning pellets is reabsorbed. But a study found that depending on the type of forest, it could take between 44 and 104 years until newly planted trees can absorb the same amount of carbon sucked up by the ones that were cut down.
Over a 100-year period, hands down, trees, pine, any of these ag crops are a good source of energy. Over 100 years. Over 25 years, over 40 years, frankly, they probably aren't.
Especially when forests play another crucial role.
Countries are spending money they should be spending on true renewables like wind and solar on this energy source that's not going to get us where we need to be as a planet.
Fast-growing plants could be another option because the carbon emitted could be absorbed again much more quickly than in trees.
Can you make biomass sustainable and make sure it has a positive carbon impact? The answer is yes. But then you have to get into the details of what kind of biomass, what kind of land.
Ultimately, most forms of biomass pretend to be better than they are. Burning wood alone, for example, is not a solution because even if it's sourced sustainably, it still produces emissions. Wood waste can, however, be digested by bacteria at a biogas facility, and organic products, like that banana peel powering your phone, can help manage waste cycles. Today, biomass energy covers only a small part of our worldwide demand. It can work in combination with other renewables, but it's not scalable to be our main energy source in the future.
Large-scale energy production requires large amount of basic materials. But what can we do with the small amount of organic waste we produce in our kitchens on a weekly basis? Those two can find purpose, as you see in this week's Doing Your Bit.
It's a shame to see good food go to waste, and not just because it has nutritional value, but also because when food rots, it releases climate-damaging emissions, like methane. Table scraps can be put to better use. This restaurant in northern Ghana has a zero food waste policy. Any leftovers are put into underground fermentation pits. Restaurant owner Martin Yelibora adds local bacteria to the mix. When sealed, it produces an organic fertilizer relatively quickly.
The usual compost takes about 6 months to a year or more. This fertilizer takes barely 3 months and is ready to fertilize the soils. We can even extract liquid fertilizer from this solid fertilizer.
To make the liquid version, Martin Yelibora adds wastewater from the kitchen to the pit. One local farmer has been using it to spray his corn crop.
The crops have changed color. Compared to what you don't apply fertilizer, you see them looking pale. When I tried the sampling, basically within 7 days, a week, I saw a change in the plants. Having seen the evidence, I'm encouraged and enthused to continue.
Martin Yelibora thinks big. He says 10,000 tonnes of solid organic fertilizer could be produced annually in northern Ghana alone from household and restaurant leftovers that would otherwise go to waste.
And how about you? If you're also doing your bit, tell us about it. Visit our website or send us a tweet. #DoingYourBit. We share your stories.
So far, we've presented examples of how organic matter can be put to good use. But sometimes, the wrong kind of waste can end up in the wrong place at the wrong time. Our next report deals with the devastating effect sewage can have on what were once pristine environments, much to the dismay of people living in the area.
Debbie Leach is not impressed. Few would guess what she's pulling up here. The River Thames in London has a few undesirable spots along its banks. And this here
is wet wipe that's caught on this twig. It's about 1.5 metre thick mound of wet wipes mixed with twigs and some silt, a few leaves, but it's basically solid, used wet wipes.
Locals have dubbed the area Wet Wipe Island.
It comes from people's houses. This starts life in people's bathrooms. People are using wet wipes in their bathrooms and then they're thinking, yuck, I'll flush that down the loo. There's no biodiversity there at all. All the small animals you'd expect to see on riverbanks and on foreshores is gone.
Debbie is part of a group of Britons monitoring the condition of the rivers. something the authorities here rarely do these days. Many are outraged that toilet waste could end up here on the riverbank. Retired police officer Ashley Smith heads up a group that conducts daily detective work. The water company for the Thames region runs a purification plant not far from here.
We see quite a nasty coating of grey, fine sediment on the bottom and brown and grey algae, which is coating the gravel, choking any weed life out of it.
Ashley Smith is on his way to a spot where the company releases the purified wastewater into the stream. But directly next to it, Ashley points to a second pipe. This one sometimes spews out untreated wastewater.
The actual chemicals, the hormones, the drugs, the bacteria, the human waste, the heavy levels of phosphate and nitrate and ammonia, that all comes out here, and that makes its way down into the River Windrush and then into the River Thames.
Sewage last flowed from it 2 days ago, he says. He's collecting film evidence.
I'm going to put some gloves on because I'm going to touch the camera after it's been in there.
The companies are allowed to release untreated wastewater into the rivers, but only in exceptional circumstances, when there's flooding or the sewers are full after heavy rain. Otherwise, it's illegal.
Our analyst can tell if it's happened by looking at water industry data, flow data, taken on 15-minute intervals. He can establish whether it's happened too early, if they've discharged it before treating sufficient for their permits. And we found a lot of illegal activity in that way.
The water company insists its activities are legal. The Environment Agency relies on companies to self-monitor. But the public outcry has now prompted an investigation. UK rivers are among the most polluted in Europe. The government and water companies are accused of failing to modernise the sewage system over decades.
This is basically a consequence of Victorian infrastructure. It's a huge undertaking to remove all of these storm overflows. They are there for emergency flash flooding events. And they've always been part of the system. But we're taking action right now to eliminate some of these and reduce their harm.
But it's predicted to take 10 or 20 years. So Ashley wants to keep up the pressure by exposing as many illegal activities as possible. He recently found an undocumented pipe from Thames Water.
It's about 3 meters down into the Thames here.
The water is in a shocking state, containing feces, old food, and grease.
Every time we've come, it's been worse than the last. It's dreadful. It's really bad.
The water company claims not to have released any untreated sewage here since March last year. So it's a mystery how this condom came out of the pipe.
We present it to the Environment Agency and I expect them to do very little. They've become almost redundant and a spectator in the engagement now between campaigners, the water industry and councillors and local people who are now really pushing for the changes.
2 of those local people arrive on the scene.
How are you?
They were hoping to go swimming.
Looking a bit browner than usual, isn't it?
It's not looking good, is it?
No.
No.
At least the water company now issues warnings when it's releasing sewage into the Thames.
It's disgusting and we shouldn't have to put up with this. The river here was so clean you could see the riverbed only a couple of decades ago. And especially when
their group has come up with another strategy to get this stretch of the river cleaned up.
The aim is that we're going to try and get designated bathing water status, which will mean that the Environment Agency are obliged to monitor regularly and try and impose, some sanctions on Thames Water.
They devised their plan along with Trevor Williams. He takes regular samples and sends the results to the authorities.
So you can see it's quite dirty today because it's just rained.
But hopefully not for much longer, because their strategy worked. This stretch of the river has now been granted bathing water status, so things ought to get a lot cleaner here soon.
It'll be the second river in the whole of the UK to have a bathing water status. So hopefully other rivers will follow suit and other water companies will take note that they can't get away with dumping their waste in the river and polluting our environment.
The campaigners are having to go to great lengths and even resort to tricks. But they, along with many Britons, just want the UK's rivers to be cleaner again.
They're small and made of plastic, sachets. These little packets might be handy, but they quickly land in the garbage bin, and they don't rot. In our web special, we chart the journey of such a sachet, from the origins of the raw materials it's made from to its end on the rubbish heap. We find out why the number of sachets is growing and why they're so lucrative for businesses and so disastrous for our planet. Find out more at dw.com/plastic.
The health of all our water sources is becoming more important than ever, especially as rising temperatures and a drop in rainfall are causing more and more water bodies to dry up. And that's just one issue that is pushing more countries to find ways to become more self-reliant.
That is true, Chris. An example of that can be seen on Reunion. The island nation in the Indian Ocean has set itself the goal of switching entirely to renewables before the end of the decade by taking advantage of all the resources at its disposal.
Reunion Island is famed for its beautiful beaches and lush green mountains. But when it comes to carbon emissions, the island's record is less attractive. Around 2/3 of its energy needs are covered by fossil fuels. This heavy oil factory in the city of Le Port is run by French utility EDF. In future, it's due to switch to largely carbon-neutral operation running on colza and soya oil. Just one step towards achieving an ambitious goal, switching to renewables completely by 2028. This power plant, owned by Albioma, runs partly on coal from South Africa and partly on domestic biomass. It will need to switch completely to biomass in future. The sugar refinery next door at least provides a convenient source of the green fuel. We utilize as much of the sugar cane as possible. We press the liquid out of it, and the sand and earth caught in the canes gets distributed on the surrounding fields as fertilizer. The molasses go to the rum distilleries. The Albioma power station uses the plant fibers to produce energy that flows into the public grid, from which we then draw our electricity. The Albioma power plant accounts for around 11% of the island's overall energy output. The conversion to all biomass production is costing the company 200 million euros, and that's just for this one plant. These are our two new storage domes. They have a capacity of 9,500 cubic meters each. These are the kind of units we mainly use. We plan to use sustainable biomass that meets European Union standards. We'll initially use wood pellets from the United States, but will later switch to suppliers closer to home, like in Mozambique and South Africa.
Plus proche de la Réunion, on est sur la zone Mozambique, l'Afrique du Sud.
Only 10% of the wood pellets will be sourced from the island. That means 900,000 tons a year will need to be imported. The company says it will still cut the plant's overall carbon footprint by over 80%. The government is interested in large-scale solar farms, like Les Cedars, a 9-megawatt project in the south of the island. Here, fruit and vegetables are grown under the solar panels, which provide the plant's protection from the hot sun. This is a small island. We have to make good use of space for new buildings, farmland and power plants. So here we are combining a solar power plant with an organic farm. We also have a battery system that stores the electricity produced during the day to feed it into the grid at peak times. The company plans to expand this model and multiply its solar output sixfold. That would be another important step towards achieving the Union's goal of covering all its energy needs with carbon-neutral renewables by 2028.
I am scared we've run out of time for today, but we are grateful that you could join us for this special edition of Eco Africa. And do be sure to tune in again next week, same time, same place. Until then, I am Sandra Twinovidio, signing off from Kampala, here in Uganda.
Looking forward to seeing you again next week, Sandra. And to all you viewers out there, do be sure to share your thoughts and comment with us on our social media platforms. For now, it's goodbye from me, Chris Alems, in Ogun State, Nigeria.